Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from her silent revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
At my mother's birthday party, I accidentally overheard every word my father said to my sister. "That girl won't receive a single dollar." I turned and looked at my sister. She was smiling a triumphant, mocking smile and said softly, "She's too busy with her important career to even notice, Dad." I didn't walk in. I didn't ask why. I simply left the house that night carrying a very clear decision with me, but what they didn't know was, some secrets should never be spoken behind a half-closed door. Thank you so much for being here. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from right now? Comment below with your city or country and tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Quick disclaimer, this story includes fictional elements crafted for educational value. Any resemblance to actual people or places is coincidental. But the message, that's universal, and it might just change how you see family loyalty. I should have known something was wrong when my mother complimented my dress. Vivian Morgan never gave compliments, at least not to me. But that Friday night in November 2024, standing in the foyer of my childhood home, I was too focused on surviving another family gathering to notice the trap being laid. The Morgan estate on Beacon Hill glittered like something out of Architectural Digest. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic light across the marble floors. A jazz quartet played softly near the curved staircase. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people's lunches. Outside, November's chill pressed against the tall windows, but inside the air was warm, perfumed, and utterly false. Over 50 guests filled the drawing room. Business associates, country club friends, extended family members whose names I could never quite remember. They laughed too loudly, kissed cheeks with practiced affection, and pretended this was about celebrating my mother's 63rd birthday instead of maintaining the social architecture that held Boston's old money together. I stood near the entrance, smoothing the navy sheath dress my mother had just praised, and reminded myself why I'd come obligation. Not love, not hope, just the mechanical fulfillment of familial duty, the kind you perform because not performing it would create more problems than it solved. Fallon. My sister's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. "You made it." Cassandra Morgan glided toward me in a butter-yellow dress that probably cost 3 months of a teacher's salary. Her phone was already raised, angled to capture her best side, which, to be fair, was every side. At 32, Cassandra had perfected the art of being looked at. Interior designer by title, influencer by trade, she'd built a life that existed primarily on Instagram stories and Pinterest boards. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, accepting her air kiss. Her perfume was expensive and overwhelming. "You look tired," she said, her smile never wavering. "Still working those crazy hours." Translation: "You look old and you're wasting your life on a career nobody here cares about." "Someone has to," I replied evenly. She laughed a practiced tinkle that probably photographed beautifully and spun away to pose with 2 women I didn't recognize. Her phone flashed. Within seconds, she was typing a caption. I didn't need to read it to know the gist. "So blessed to have family. Hashtag sister time. Hashtag grateful. Hashtag Boston life." I moved deeper into the party, nodding at faces that looked vaguely familiar. My mother materialized beside me with the silent efficiency of a cruise missile. "Darling, you look exhausted," Vivian said, touching my arm with cool fingers. "Are they working you too hard at that firm?" "I'm fine, Mother." Her pale blue eyes assessed me with the detachment of an appraiser valuing furniture. "Well, try to smile, dear. People will think you're unhappy." She drifted away before I could respond, her champagne-colored gown trailing elegantly behind her. Across the room, she found Cassandra and immediately brightened. "Sweetheart, you're absolutely glowing. That dress is perfection." I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and sipped it slowly. The favoritism wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising anymore. Somewhere around my 15th birthday, I'd stopped expecting equity and started building a life where their approval didn't matter. My father stood near the fireplace holding court with 3 men in expensive suits. Walter Morgan, 65 and still commanding, gestured with his scotch as he spoke. "The textile market's been challenging," he was saying. Import duties, supply chain disruptions, you know how it is. The men nodded sympathetically. I caught fragments: inflation, tariffs, margins. Business talk, the kind that filled our dinner table growing up. My father had built Morgan and Company textiles from the ground up, and he wore that accomplishment like armor. He glanced my way once briefly, then returned to his conversation without acknowledgement. Par for the course. Preston Cole. Cassandra's husband worked the room with practiced charm. He was handsome in that calculated way some men are: perfect haircut, perfect teeth, perfect handshake. Private equity consulting. I'd heard him say earlier to someone asking about his work. I'd looked into his background once discreetly. The details were vague. The confidence was not. Something about him had always felt off, like a painting, where the perspective doesn't quite align. But Cassandra seemed happy, and God knows my parents adored him. Fallon. I turned to find Uncle Wallace standing beside me. My father's older brother, 70 years old and retired from the Massachusetts Superior Court, regarded me with kind, tired eyes. "Hi, Uncle Wallace. How are you holding up?" His voice was gentle. "Same as always." He studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "You've always been the smart one, Fallon. Don't forget that." The comment felt weighted, meaningful in a way I couldn't quite parse. Before I could respond, he patted my shoulder and moved away, leaving me with the uncomfortable sensation that he'd just tried to tell me something important. I checked my watch, 8:45. I'd stayed long enough. I could slip out, now send flowers tomorrow, and maintain the fiction of family harmony for another few months. I set my empty glass on a side table and made my way toward the back of the house, where my coat waited in my father's study. The hallway was quiet, insulated from the party's noise by thick walls and expensive carpeting. I passed family photos, mostly of Cassandra, and reached the heavy oak door at the end. My hand closed around the brass knob. That's when I heard my name. Fallon. The voice was muffled but unmistakable, my father's deep baritone. I froze. Has to be done carefully. That was my mother, her tone clipped and businesslike. "We can't afford mistakes." "I know." My father again. "The lawyers have already drawn up the paperwork." "And what about—" A pause, then Cassandra's voice, younger, higher, uncertain. "What about my sister?" Silence. Then my father, clear as a bell. "Your sister isn't getting a single thing from this estate. Not $1. I should have walked away. Should have gone straight to my car, driven back to my apartment, and pretended I'd heard nothing. Instead, I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. I didn't burst through that door. I didn't shout or demand answers. Instead, I did what I do best. I gathered information, and what I heard in the next 5 minutes changed everything. "But Daddy, the studio's hemorrhaging money." Cassandra's voice carried that particular whine she'd perfected at age 7, the one that always got her what she wanted. "Newbury Street rent is $18,000 a month. I'm barely covering costs. Blair says I should close it, but I can't. My followers expect—" "I know, sweetheart." My father's voice was warm in a way it had never been with me. "That's why Preston and I are working on a solution." Preston, of course. "The issue," my brother-in-law said, his tone smooth as expensive whiskey, "is the business's outstanding tax liabilities. If Cassandra and I take over the estate assets and corporate shares, we need someone to absorb the debts. The IRS audits the supplier payments." My heartbeat remained steady. This wasn't shock I was feeling, it was confirmation. I'd suspected for years that I was valued for utility rather than love. Hearing it stated plainly was almost a relief. "That's why we're removing Fallon from the beneficiary list," my mother said brightly, as if discussing dinner plans, "but keeping her as guarantor on the corporate holding accounts. She makes, what, $450,000 a year plus bonuses. She can weather this hit." "Exactly." My father again. "We'll transfer the property, deed, and company shares to Cassandra. Clean and clear. Fallon handles the back taxes and defaulted loans. She's single, no children, no real responsibilities. It's the least she can do for this family." Cassandra giggled. Actually giggled. "And she won't even see it coming. She's too busy with her important career to pay attention." The sound of glasses clinking. A toast. I stood perfectly still in that hallway, my hand still resting on the doorknob, and felt something click into place in my mind. Not rage, not yet. just cold, crystalline clarity. They were planning to make me a financial scapegoat. Over $10 million in debt, I estimated based on the terms they were describing. Business liabilities, tax liens, supplier defaults, all of it carefully structured to land on my personal credit, while they walked away with $7 million in property and assets. Then I remembered something. 5 years ago, after a nasty lawsuit nearly bankrupted my father's company, I'd helped him restructure. We'd created an irrevocable trust for tax purposes. He'd given me full power of attorney to manage the family accounts, a precaution, he'd said, in case something happened to him. He'd never revoked it, which meant the $2.4 million sitting in those trust accounts, my early tech investments from 2012 to 2018, my stock gains. My bonuses that I'd parked there to help his credit rating was legally mine. The trust documents said so. They'd just forgotten to check. I stepped back from the door carefully, my heels silent on the runner carpet. No confrontation, not yet. Tactics mattered more than emotion. I retrieved my coat from a different closet, slipped out the side entrance, and walked into November's bite. Snow had begun to fall fine and cold against my face. The city smelled like winter, clean and sharp and unforgiving. Sharon was waiting by the black sedan at the curb, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I approached, her expression shifting to concern. "Everything all right, Miss Morgan? You're earlier than usual." "I'm fine." My voice came out controlled, professional. "Just tired, let's head home." She opened the rear door and I slid inside. As we pulled away from Beacon Hill, I watched the strings of white lights blur past the window. The city looked softer in the snow, less harsh than it actually was. A pretty lie. I wasn't crying. I was too practical for that. Instead, my mind was already working through scenarios. They want to use me as a shield. What happens if I remove that shield entirely? I thought about the trust documents I'd drafted 5 years ago. The power of attorney Walter had signed in my office, witnessed, and notarized. He'd been desperate, then terrified of losing everything. He'd handed me the keys to the kingdom and then forgotten he'd done it. The irrevocable trust meant exactly what it said. I was the legal owner of those funds. $2.4 million. My money, my investments. It had only ever been sitting there to bolster their balance sheets and credit scores. "Actually, Sharon," I said, leaning forward slightly, "take a detour, drive to my apartment instead of the usual drop-off. I have some work to do tonight." Sharon's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. She'd been my assistant for 6 years. She knew when I was in strategic mode. The kind of work that requires privacy. Exactly that kind. Understood. 20 minutes later, I stood in my penthouse apartment overlooking downtown Boston. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in glass and steel. I'd bought this place 3 years ago with my own money, decorated it myself, all clean lines and modern furniture, the opposite of my parents' Baroque excess. I didn't turn on the lights. The city provided enough glow. I opened my laptop at the kitchen island and logged into the secure banking portal. The family trust accounts appeared on screen, multiple portfolios totaling $2.4 million. My early bets on tech startups that had paid off beautifully. My stock picks. My bonuses carefully invested. Legally mine, always had been. They'd treated it like family money. It never was. I pulled up the trust documents, reviewed the terms one more time. Power of attorney active. Beneficiary Fallon Morgan. Revocation clause none executed. Everything was in order. I navigated to the transfer portal, set up a new receiving account under my personal LLC Apex Capital Holdings. I'd established it last year for consulting work, completely separate from anything family-related. The interface was clean and simple. Account details, amount, authorization code. My cursor hovered over the button Initiate Transfer. One click and $2.4 million would move to my personal LLC. Completely legal, completely within my rights as the beneficiary. The transfer would process overnight. By morning, the money would be locked in my accounts, protected by corporate structure and legal firewalls. They wanted to cut me out while keeping me liable for their debts. They wanted to use my success as a cushion for their failures. They'd toasted to it, laughed about it, planned it like a business deal. I thought about calling them, confronting them, asking why. Then I realized I already knew why. I'd always known. I clicked the button. Transfer initiated. Processing time 6 to 8 hours. A confirmation number appeared on screen. I saved it, logged out, closed the laptop. By morning, it would be too late to stop. I poured myself a glass of wine, something expensive I'd bought for myself, and stood at the window watching snow fall over Boston. Somewhere across the city, my family was probably still celebrating, still toasting Cassandra's future, still planning my financial destruction. They had no idea the ground had just shifted beneath them. I raised my glass to my reflection in the dark window. "To family," I said softly. Then I drank. The city was quiet at this hour. Most of Boston slept dreaming of weekend plans and holiday shopping. I was wide awake, systematically dismantling my family's financial safety net. One transfer at a time. I sat at my kitchen island laptop, glowing in the darkness. Outside, snow had begun to accumulate on my balcony. The wine glass sat empty beside me. I didn't need it anymore. This required a clear head and steady hands. Account 1, Primary Executive Trust. Balance $950,000. I navigated to the secure portal and clicked through to the transfer interface. This money represented my tech startup investments from 2015 to 2018 companies I'd researched, bet on with my own bonuses, and watched grow. The trust structure had protected my father's assets during his lawsuit, but the investments inside those were mine. I entered the routing number for Apex Capital Holdings, my personal LLC, and typed it twice to confirm. 2-factor authentication. My phone buzzed. I entered the 6-digit code. Transfer initiated. I left $10 in the account to prevent an automatic closure alert. No need to wake them early. No guilt stirred. This wasn't theft. This was reclamation. Account 2, High Yield Savings. Balance $580,000. My stock portfolio gains. I'd moved this money into the family trust in 2019 to boost Walter's credit rating when he'd needed to refinance his business loans. Blue chip dividends, tech sector growth, careful diversification, all mine. Transfer, authenticate, confirm. The numbers disappeared from one column, reappeared in another. Account 3 investment portfolio. Balance $870,000. Cryptocurrency gains from 2016 cashed out at the right moment. Dividend stocks. Patient accumulation while my family spent theirs on appearances. Final transfer, final authentication, final confirmation. Total $2.4 million. I closed the laptop and stood at the window watching my reflection in the dark glass. Calm, composed, certain. They'd gotten too comfortable. 5 years of treating my money as theirs, simply because it sat in accounts tied to Walter's name. But legal ownership had never changed. I'd always been the beneficiary of the irrevocable trust, a fact they'd conveniently forgotten. I thought about the day my father had sat in my office, panic stripping away his usual confidence. A defective medical equipment shipment, a lawsuit that threatened everything. "I'll lose it all," he'd said, voice cracking. "Help me protect the assets, Fallon." So I had. I'd created the irrevocable trust, made myself the legal beneficiary to shield his wealth from creditors. I'd explained this. He'd signed anyway. "I trust you completely," he'd said then. The irony burned now. For 5 years, I'd subsidized their lives. My money kept Walter's credit score high enough to refinance. It kept Vivian's country club membership active. It indirectly funded Cassandra's Newberry Street studio through family loans never meant to be repaid. Last year, Cassandra had borrowed $50,000 for inventory. She'd never paid it back. When I'd mentioned it, she'd laughed. "That's family money, Fallon. Don't be petty." Family money. Those $50,000 came from my Amazon stock profits, my research, my risk, my timing. But I'd stayed quiet. Kept playing the role they'd assigned, the stable one, the responsible one, the safety net they could always lean on. Not anymore. I checked the laptop screen one last time. Processing. Estimated completion 6 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. By 9 tomorrow morning, Cassandra's credit card would decline. Walter would see $10 balances where millions used to sit. Vivian would demand explanations nobody could provide. I set my phone to silent and walked to my bedroom. For the first time in years, I felt no anxiety about missing family calls, no guilt about not doing enough, just quiet. I slid between sheets I'd bought with my own money in an apartment I'd purchased with my own down payment in a life I'd built separate from their expectations. My last thought before sleep, they wanted me out of the inheritance. But they forgot I was never in it for their money. I woke naturally at 7 Saturday morning. No alarm, no anxiety, just soft winter light and the distant sounds of the city stirring. I made coffee slowly, French pressed the real ritual, and stood at my window watching snow-dust Boston Harbor. The city looked clean under its white coating. My phone sat face down on the counter. I sipped my coffee first, then flipped it over. All transfers complete. $2.4 million deposited to Apex Capital Holdings, LLC, 6:03 a.m., 3 minutes after the banks opened. The money now sat in offshore structured accounts protected by corporate legal frameworks, unreachable by anyone but me. I smiled, small, satisfied. "Shield down," I murmured. At 9:15, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 23 missed calls, 15 texts, 3 voicemails, all from family. I poured a second cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen island watching notifications stack up, each one more frantic than the last. Cassandra, 9:02 a.m. My card just got declined at Tati. So embarrassing. Cassandra, 9:04 a.m. Dad says the accounts are empty. What's going on? Cassandra, 9:08 a.m. Fallen, where is the money? Cassandra, 9:12 a.m. You stole from the family. Are you insane? Walter had called 7 times. Vivian, 6. Preston, 3. Even Uncle Wallace once, probably at their insistence. I didn't answer. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them feel what it's like when your safety net vanishes without warning. Outside my window, Boston looked peaceful. Inside, I felt the same. Somewhere across the city, my family was discovering what I'd always known: you can't take someone for granted and expect them to stay. My phone rang again. Walter. I let it go to voicemail and opened my laptop to review next week's schedule. Client meetings Tuesday and Thursday. Portfolio review Wednesday. Normal, productive work that had nothing to do with family drama. The phone kept ringing. I kept drinking my coffee. I didn't have to answer. Not yet. Let them sit with the panic for a while. Let them wonder what had happened. Let them realize slowly that the person they'd planned to use as a financial scapegoat had just removed herself from the equation entirely. By tonight, they'd be desperate. By Monday, they'd be scrambling to understand how $2.4 million had simply vanished from accounts they thought they controlled. But right now, in this moment, with snow falling softly outside and coffee warm in my hands, I allowed myself something I hadn't felt in years: peace. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Cassandra, all caps, full of accusations. I set the phone face down and turned back to my window. They could wait. By the time I finally picked up my phone at 10 o'clock, my voicemail was full. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, settled into the chair by the window, and started reading. The messages were educational. Cassandra's first text had arrived at 9:15, demanding I call the bank immediately because her card had been declined at some store. Humiliating, she'd said. The follow-up 8 minutes later escalated to all caps. Even her backup card had been rejected. My father's first voicemail came at 9:31, confused, and asking why the account balances showed only $10 when he'd tried to transfer payment to an overseas supplier. By 9:45, his confusion had curdled into anger. He wanted to know where all the money had gone and what I'd done. The third voicemail, recorded at 10:03, was pure threat. He accused me of stealing from my own family and promised to call the police and FBI if I didn't return every cent by noon. I was dead to the family, he said. My mother's texts wove between the voicemails like poison, first claiming my father was having heart palpitations because of me, then calling me selfish and ungrateful, finally warning that when the police came, I shouldn't expect help from them. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the progression with clinical detachment. Walter had moved from bewilderment to legal threats in less than 30 minutes. Vivian had dropped her loving mother persona immediately. Cassandra cared only about her public embarrassment, not the family crisis. What struck me most was what they didn't say. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody suggested we talk. Just straight to accusations as if my guilt were obvious and my motivations irrelevant. I set down my cup and dialed my father's number. He answered before the first ring finished. "Where is the money?" "Good morning, Dad." I kept my voice perfectly level. "How was the rest of Mom's party?" "Don't you dare play games with me. $2.4 million is gone." "What the hell did you do?" "I withdrew my money from the trust accounts I established as the beneficiary. That's our money, family money." "Actually, it's not." I leaned back in my chair, watching snow fall past my window. "Let me refresh your memory. 5 years ago, you came to my office in a panic. That medical equipment lawsuit threatened to bankrupt you. You asked me to set up an irrevocable trust to shield your assets from creditors. Remember?" The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then stammering, "That was just paperwork, a formality." "That was federal law, Dad. An irrevocable trust cannot be modified without the beneficiary's consent. I'm the beneficiary. The $2.4 million came from my tech investments between 2012 and 2018, my early bets on startups that paid off, my stock picks, my cryptocurrency gains that I cashed out at the right time. I parked that money in those accounts to boost your credit rating so you could refinance your business loans. You got comfortable. You forgot whose money it actually was. You can't do this." His voice rose to a shout. "I'll sue you. I'll have you arrested for embezzlement, for withdrawing my own money." I allowed myself a small smile he couldn't see. "Good luck with that, Dad, but please do call the police. Bring the trust documents. Bring your lawyer. I'll be happy to explain to them how irrevocable trusts work under federal law." The silence that followed was different, smaller, deflated. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its fury and found something closer to desperation. "Fallon, please. We need that money. The business has debts, your mother's expenses. Cassandra's studio is failing and you should have thought about that before planning to cut me out of the inheritance while making me the guarantor for all your debts." "Yes, Dad, I heard you last night, every single word." I ended the call. My phone rang again almost immediately. Vivian this time. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided I might as well finish this now. "Fallon, sweetheart, please just listen for 1 minute. I'm not your sweetheart mother. We both know that." She made a sound like a sob, though I suspected it was calculated. "Your father is under terrible stress. His heart. He could have a heart attack over this. Do you want to kill your own father? If his heart is that fragile, you should probably take him to the hospital instead of calling me." The sob disappeared. Her voice went cold and sharp as a blade. "This is about jealousy, isn't it? You've always resented Cassandra. You can't stand that she's beautiful and married and happy while you're alone in that sterile apartment with nothing but your precious career. I'm hanging up now." "We gave you everything," she was shouting now. "We raised you, fed you, paid for your schools. You did the legal minimum required of parents. As for my education, I paid for business school myself with scholarships and student loans. But thanks for the revisionist history." I ended the call and immediately declined 3 more Cassandra Walter. Again, Vivian again. I set the phone face down and opened my laptop, pulling up my contacts. Rebecca Cross answered my text within seconds, suggesting we meet at Tata Bakery on Charles Street in 30 minutes. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment. Outside, Boston looked clean and quiet under fresh snow. The drive to Beacon Hill took 15 minutes through empty weekend streets. I parked 2 blocks from the cafe and walked, letting the cold air clear my head. Tot was crowded with the Saturday brunch crowd, couples sharing pastries, students hunched over laptops, the rich smell of espresso and fresh bread. I ordered a cappuccino and claimed a corner table by the window where I could watch the street. At 12:30, Rebecca walked in. She was impossible to miss, tall and sharp-featured dark hair pulled into a severe bun, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost 3 months of rent for most people. She spotted me immediately and wove through the tables with the easy confidence of someone who'd never lost a case she cared about. "Let me guess," she said, sliding into the seat across from me and setting her briefcase on the table with a decisive thunk. "Your family just discovered you're not their personal ATM anymore." "Something like that." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and clicked her pen, but her eyes stayed on my face, reading me the way she'd read 1,000 hostile witnesses. A slow smile spread across her features. Whatever you did, Fallon and I can tell you did something based on that look you're trying very hard to hide. I'm guessing it was both perfectly legal and absolutely devastating. I took a sip of my cappuccino, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Outside the window, snowflakes drifted lazily past. Inside, I felt calmer than I had in years. You know me too well, Rebecca. She leaned forward, pen poised over paper. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. So I did. Rebecca assured me I was legally bulletproof. She was right, of course. But legal protection doesn't stop desperate people from making stupid decisions. By Sunday night, my family had proven just how stupid desperation could make them. At Tata, after I'd finished explaining everything, Rebecca had set down her pen and leaned back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just been handed an unlosable case. She'd reviewed the trust documents on her tablet, checking the signature dates and beneficiary designations with the thoroughness that made her one of Boston's best defense attorneys. Irrevocable trust you're listed as sole beneficiary power of attorney was never revoked, she'd said, tapping the screen. Fallon, they can't touch you. This money was always legally yours. Any lawyer with half a brain will tell them exactly what I'm telling you. I'd watch snow fall past the cafe window, feeling oddly calm. They'll still try. Let them waste their money. But understand this, you've done nothing wrong. You withdrew funds from an account you legally owned. That's not theft. That's not embezzlement. That's basic property rights. She'd paused, studying my face. What's their next move, do you think? If they're smart, nothing. Accept the loss and move on. And if they're not smart, then they'll do something dramatic and legally questionable. I'd allowed myself a small smile, which honestly will make your job more interesting. Rebecca had laughed. I like the way you think. She'd been right about the dramatic part. Monday morning, my phone rang while I was reviewing market reports at my apartment. Uncle Wallace's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Unlike my parents and sister, he never called unless it mattered. I need to tell you something, he said without preamble. I was at the house last night for dinner. Your father, mother, Cassandra, and Preston had what they called a strategy session. I set down my coffee. What kind of strategy? The desperate kind. His voice carried a weight I recognized, judicial disapproval mixed with family loyalty. Preston suggested they transfer everything directly into Cassandra's name. The house, the company shares, all of it. Before you could, in their words, cause more damage. My heartbeat didn't change. This was interesting, but not unexpected. How quickly? They're filing this week. Emergency asset restructuring through probate court citing irreconcilable family conflict. Walter's convinced you're trying to destroy them financially. He paused. I tried to warn them this was foolish, Fallon. They wouldn't listen. Your father's so panicked he's not thinking clearly. Uncle Wallace, I haven't done anything to them. I only took back what was mine. I know that, but they see it as an attack and they're retaliating the only way they know how. Another pause, longer this time. Fallon, they're planning to cut you out completely. Are you prepared for that? I looked out at the Boston skyline, the morning sun glinting off glass towers. I've been prepared for that my entire life. I thought you might say that. He sighed. Be careful, honey. Desperate people do unpredictable things. We ended the call and I sat for a moment thinking. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated, but the direction was exactly what I'd expected. Fear made people impulsive. Impulsive people made mistakes. Tuesday morning, Rebecca called with confirmation. Your father just filed emergency transfer papers. He's moving everything to Cassandra, the Beacon Hill property. All company shares, investment accounts, everything. His lawyer pushed it through probate court, citing family dispute and citing his age and health as reasons for immediate restructuring. How fast? It'll be finalized by end of business today. Once it's done, you're officially cut out. No inheritance, no claim to the estate, nothing. She paused. Fallon, are you sure about this? Once those papers are signed, there's no going back. I'm sure. There's something you're not telling me, isn't there? I smiled at my reflection in my apartment window. Let's just say they're about to own something they think is valuable. They don't know what comes with it. I could almost hear Rebecca's mind working through the implications, the liabilities. They're transferring the debt obligations too, among other things. Jesus! She laughed sharp and surprised. Fallon, you're terrifying sometimes. You know that. I'll take that as a compliment. At 4 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang, Cassandra. I considered ignoring it, then decided this would be entertaining. Guess what, big sister? Her voice dripped with triumph. Dad and Mom just signed everything over to me. The Beacon Hill house, the company, all of it. $7.3 million in assets. Congratulations, I said evenly. That's it. That's all you have to say. What else would you like me to say? I thought you'd be upset. You tried to steal from us, and now you're getting exactly what you deserve, nothing. She was practically crowing. You thought you were so smart taking that money, but you just showed everyone who you really are, greedy, selfish, and now you have nothing. If that makes you happy, Cassandra, I'm posting about this. Everyone's going to know you tried to rob your own family and failed. You're not even invited to Christmas dinner anymore. You're dead to this family. Noted. Anything else? The silence that followed suggested my calm was infuriating her more than any argument would have. When she spoke again, her voice had gone sharp. You don't even care, do you? That's your problem, Fallon. No emotions, no heart, just your cold, calculating little brain. Is that what you think? That's what I know. Enjoy your lonely life. Preston and I are celebrating tonight. We're going to Oak Bluffs for the weekend, actually. Private jet, first class all the way. She laughed. Courtesy of my new assets. Have fun, I said and meant it. She hung up, probably frustrated that I hadn't given her the dramatic confrontation she'd wanted. I set my phone down and looked out at the Boston skyline. The Charles River reflected the late afternoon sun like molten copper. Rebecca had been right. They'd done something dramatic and legally questionable. What they didn't know, what Cassandra couldn't possibly understand as she prepared to celebrate her victory, was that she'd just signed paperwork making her personally liable for an $8.7 million fraudulent loan and $4.9 million in unpaid taxes. They thought they'd trapped me by cutting me out. They'd actually trapped themselves. Now I just had to wait for them to realize it. I should have left with Sharon that Thursday. She'd offered to wait while I finished the quarterly portfolio reports, but I'd waved her off. I'd catch an Uber. It was only 6:30. The parking garage was well lit. What could happen? The office was quiet in that particular way of late evenings when everyone sensible had already gone home. Most of my colleagues cleared out by 5:30 on Thursdays, eager to start their weekends early. I preferred the silence. No ringing phones, no meeting interruptions, just the clean focus of numbers and analysis. The quarterly reports were due Friday morning, and I'd rather finish them now than rush tomorrow. At 6:15, Sharon had stopped by my door one last time. Ms. Morgan, I can wait if you need a ride. Go home, Sharon. Enjoy your evening. I'll grab an Uber. She'd hesitated, her coat already on. You're sure, with everything happening with your family? I'm fine. They're angry, not dangerous. I'd believed that when I said it. She'd left reluctantly, and I'd worked another 20 minutes before saving my files and packing my briefcase. The building felt eerily empty as I rode the elevator down to B3, the level where I kept my assigned parking spot. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, one of them dying, casting stuttering shadows across the concrete. I stepped out of the elevator into air that smelled of cold concrete and exhaust fumes. My heels clicked sharply against the ground, echoing in the cavernous space. Only 3 cars remained on this level. Mine, a black sedan, sat in the far corner where I always parked it next to the support pillar that made the spot slightly less desirable and therefore usually available. I walked toward it, briefcase in one hand, keys in the other, already running through my mental checklist for tomorrow's meetings. The Charles Street presentation needed one more revision. The Henderson account required follow-up. I was debating whether to Uber or just drive myself when 2 figures stepped out from between the parked cars. Both wore dark hoodies, faces partially obscured. My instincts screamed wrong before my conscious mind caught up. I stopped walking, calculating. The elevator was 40 feet behind me. My car 30 feet ahead. The 2 men blocking the path between. Fallon Morgan. The taller one's voice was flat practiced. I kept my voice steady. Can I help you? Your sister says you should back off. The second man was shorter, stockier. He flexed his hands, deliberate intimidation. My heart rate spiked, but my mind stayed clear. Pure adrenaline clarity, not panic. I don't know what you're talking about. The tall one moved fast, grabbing my wrist. Give back the money. I yanked my arm back hard. Get away from me. The stocky one shoved me, and I stumbled sideways into my car door. Pain flared in my shoulder where I hit the metal. This is your warning. Next time will be worse. Something in me snapped into training I'd almost forgotten I had. 3 years of Krav Maga classes that had felt like paranoid overkill when I'd signed up for them. My instructor's voice echoed in my head. Make noise. Fight dirty. Create opportunities. I screamed loud, piercing the kind of sound that carries through concrete structures. Dropped my briefcase. Grabbed for my phone. Shut up! The tall one lunged for me. I kicked hard, aiming for his kneecap the way I'd been taught. Connected. He stumbled back with a curse. The stocky one grabbed my arm, wrenching it behind my back. White-hot pain shot through my shoulder. He slammed me against the car door again. I felt my elbow scrape against metal, warm blood, immediately wetting my sleeve. Hey, security freeze. A building guard appeared from the stairwell, one hand on his walkie-talkie, the other reaching for his belt. This is security. Step away from her now. The stocky one released me, and both men bolted. Their footsteps echoed as they sprinted toward the emergency exit stairwell. A car engine roared to life somewhere below their escape vehicle, waiting. The guard chased after them, but they were already gone, the stairwell door slamming shut. The guard returned, breathing hard. Ma'am, are you hurt? I was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting. I'm okay, bruised. They were trying to scare me, I think. I'm calling the police. Don't move anything, this is a crime scene. He spoke into his radio, rapid-fire professional. Code 3B3 level. Assault in progress. Suspects fled. Need BPD response. 20 minutes later, 2 Boston police officers arrived. Officer Martinez Young, thorough with a notebook already out, took my statement, while his partner reviewed the security camera footage with the building's head of security. Can you describe them, Ms. Morgan? 2 men mid-20s, dark hoodies. One tall one, shorter and heavier. The tall one said my sister sent them. Martinez's pen paused. Your sister hired someone to assault you. I don't know if she directly hired them, but they mentioned her by name. They told me to back off and give back money. What money? I explained briefly, family, financial dispute, asset transfer, my withdrawal of my own funds. Martinez nodded, writing steadily. We'll review the security footage. This garage has cameras at every level. We should get faces, maybe a plate number from their vehicle. He looked up. Do you feel safe going home? Yes. This was targeted, not random. They delivered their message. What message? That I should back down. There's a family dispute over money. We'll investigate. I strongly recommend you file for a restraining order against anyone you think might be involved. I'll contact my lawyer tonight. From the police station, I called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. Fallon, what's wrong? I need you to file an emergency restraining order. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Cassandra hired someone to assault me in my parking garage. Silence, then quietly dangerous. Are you hurt? Bruised, shaken, angry. Did they identify themselves? They mentioned Cassandra specifically, said she sent them. That's assault and conspiracy to commit assault, criminal charges. I heard papers rustling. I'm filing the restraining order tonight, and Fallon. This just crossed a line. Physical violence. They just handed us ammunition. Rebecca insisted on driving me home herself. She came up to my apartment, checked every room, made sure all my locks worked and my phone was charged. Call me if anything happens. Anything. After she left, I stood in my bathroom examining the bruises, already darkening on my shoulder. Purple-blue splotches, tender to the touch. My elbow had a deep scrape cleaned and bandaged by the paramedics, but still throbbing. Cassandra had hired people to hurt me. Not to kill, that would be too obvious, too final. Just to frighten, to intimidate, to make me back down. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, final warning. I screenshot it immediately, sent it to Rebecca and Officer Martinez. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and made a decision. I wouldn't back down. I'd move forward. The weekend passed in a strange kind of limbo. I gave my statement to the police, twice more met with Rebecca twice, and iced the bruises on my shoulder until the purple faded to a sickly yellow-green. Monday morning, I went back to work. Meanwhile, my family was about to discover what they'd actually inherited. I arrived at the office at 8:30, earlier than usual. The bruises were well hidden under my navy blazer, and I'd covered the scrape on my elbow with a long-sleeved silk blouse. Nobody needed to know what had happened Thursday night that was personal, and I preferred to keep my professional life clean and separate. Lawrence Whitfield stopped by my office around 9:15. My boss was 58, silver-haired, and had the kind of measured calm that came from 30 years managing other people's money. He knocked on my open door even though he didn't need to. "Morgan, security filed a report about Thursday. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, personal matter being handled." He studied me with the same careful assessment he used on quarterly earnings reports. "If you need time off—" "I don't. Work is actually the best distraction." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But if that changes my doors open—" He paused. "And Morgan Security's been instructed to escort you to your car every evening until further notice. Non-negotiable." "Understood. Thank you." After he left, I turned back to my computer and checked the time. 10:47. The foreclosure notice would arrive today. Banks always sent certified mail on Mondays, and the timeline was predictable once an account went 90 days past due. The math was simple. November 19th, transfer 4 business days for the bank system to update ownership records, another day for the automated notice to generate and print. It would have been mailed Friday, delivered this morning. The waiting game had begun. I didn't witness what happened next. Rebecca reconstructed it for me later that afternoon, piecing together details from multiple sources, including a very panicked call from my family's attorney. Cassandra was at her Newberry Street studio sorting through mail when the bomb detonated. The estate's mail had been forwarded to her business address as part of the asset transfer, and she'd been going through it with the distracted annoyance of someone expecting bills and catalogs. She'd told her assistant Blair about it that morning, complaining about how tedious it was to handle all of Dad's boring business stuff. The plain manila envelope from Bank of America stood out. Certified mail, the kind that requires a signature. She'd signed for it without thinking and torn it open while sipping her third oat milk latte of the morning. Notice of default. Commercial loan account. Number 478-2-9. X. Original principal. $8,700,000. Current balance $8,947,320, including penalties and accrued interest. Status 90 days past due. Action required immediate payment or foreclosure proceedings will commence within 30 days. She'd stared at it, Rebecca told me later, for a full minute before the words made sense. When they did, her first reaction was confusion, not panic. What loan she didn't remember Dad mentioning any $8 million loan. She kept reading. Loan origination date. March 15th, 2022. Collateral Morgan and Company Textiles. LLC business assets. Equipment inventory. Additional security secondary lien on residential property at 127 Mount Vernon Street, Boston, Massachusetts. Current owner of record as of November 19th, 2025, Cassandra Morgan. The panic hit then sharp and immediate. She'd called the bank from her studio, her voice climbing an octave with each sentence. "There's been a mistake. I didn't take out this loan." The bank representative had been professionally sympathetic but inflexible. "Are you Cassandra Morgan, current owner of Morgan and Company Textiles per state business registry?" "Yes, but..." "Then you assumed all outstanding debt obligations when ownership transferred on November 19th. This loan is now your responsibility, Ms. Morgan." "That's impossible." "I'm afraid the documentation is quite clear. The transfer was filed with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. All assets and all liabilities transferred to you." She'd hung up and immediately pulled up the IRS business account portal for Morgan and Company Textiles, something she'd gained access to as part of the ownership transfer but hadn't bothered checking until now. The screen loaded and her world collapsed. Federal Tax Lion Notice. Outstanding corporate tax liability, $2,847,392. Unpaid import duties and tariffs, $1,438,256. Penalties and interest, $614,352. Total amount due, $4,900,000. Collection status active. Asset seizure authorized. Her hands had started shaking as she did the math. $8.7 million in loan debt, $4.9 million in tax debt, $13.6 million total. Against that, she had a $7.3 million house that was apparently collateral for part of the loan and a textile business that was actively losing money. Net worth negative $6.3 million. She'd driven to the estate in what her lawyer later described as a state of acute distress, arriving around 11:30 and storming through the front door without knocking. Walter and Vivian had been in the study. The confrontation that followed was loud enough that the housekeeper heard every word from the kitchen. "Did you know about this debt?" Cassandra had screamed, waving the foreclosure notice. Walter went pale. "What debt? What are you talking about?" She'd thrown the papers at him. $8.7 million plus $5 million to the IRS, eh? Vivian had picked up the papers with shaking hands, her face draining of color as she read. There must be some mistake. But Walter recognized the loan documents. His voice came out strangled. Preston took out that loan in 2022. He said it was for business expansion, to modernize the equipment. With your signature? Walter stared at the signature line. I never signed this. That's not... He must have forged it. I don't care who forged what. The bank says I own it now. The IRS says I'm liable. Vivian grabbed her daughter's arm. Call Fallon. She has money. She'll help. The silence that followed was, according to the housekeeper's account, absolutely arctic. Cassandra's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. After I hired people to attack her. Are you insane? Walter was already on the phone with their attorney, his voice climbing toward panic. Can we reverse the transfer? The lawyer's response came through speakerphone clear and final. It's been filed with the state. It's permanent. The only way to reverse it would be with Ms. Cassandra Morgan's consent, and even then it would require proving duress or incompetence, which, given that she was the one who pushed for the transfer. Mr. Morgan, there's no legal remedy here. Silence fell over the study. My phone rang at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Rebecca's name lit up the screen. Your sister just discovered she owes $13.6 million. I was reviewing a client portfolio when she said it. I set down my pen carefully. How's she taking it? Her lawyer says she's having a breakdown. Your parents have tried calling you 17 times. I glanced at my phone, all blocked numbers. I won't answer. Good. Fallon, they're going to come for you. They'll claim you orchestrated this whole thing. Let them try. I'm serious. They're desperate now, desperate and cornered. That's when people get dangerous. I thought about the 2 men in the parking garage, about the bruises still yellowing on my shoulder. They already got dangerous, Rebecca. This is just the consequence. She was quiet for a moment. You know the real war is just starting, right? I looked out my office window at the Boston skyline, gray clouds gathering over the harbor. Somewhere across the city, my sister was realizing she'd celebrated inheriting a financial catastrophe. My parents were realizing they'd given away everything to protect assets that were actually liabilities. Preston was probably realizing his fraud was about to be exposed, and I was sitting in my corner office, safe and solvent, watching it all unfold exactly as I'd known it would. Let it start, I said quietly. The police moved faster than I'd expected. By Tuesday morning, they'd traced the Venmo payment for the parking garage attack back to an account belonging to Blair Montgomery, Cassandra's best friend and constant companion. By Wednesday afternoon, they were knocking on her door, and by evening, Detective Martinez was calling me to come down to the station. I drove through traffic already strung with early Christmas lights, the city's cheerfulness feeling absurd given the circumstances. Martinez met me in a conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and industrial cleaning solution. Blair Montgomery confessed, he said without preamble. She facilitated the attack. Your sister gave her $1,500 and instructed her to hire someone to scare you off. He turned his laptop toward me. "These are the text messages we recovered." I leaned forward to read. Cassandra's texts to Blair from November 20th were desperate and direct, asking her friend to find someone who could convince me to back off nothing permanent, just a scare. Blair had protested that she didn't know people like that, and Cassandra had told her to use the guys from the downtown club who owed her money. When Blair said it felt wrong, Cassandra had written that I'd stolen from the family and deserved worse than a scare. The evidence of my sister's desperation was almost pitiful in its carelessness. She hadn't even bothered to delete the messages. "We're building charges for assault and criminal conspiracy," Martinez continued. "Ms. Montgomery is cooperating for a reduced sentence, but there's more." He pulled out a thicker folder. Blair also provided emails from 3 years ago. The printouts were dated March 2022 exchanges between Cassandra and Preston about the loan forgery. In the first email, Cassandra told Preston that the signature samples were in Dad's filing cabinet, that he never checked that desk drawer. Preston had responded asking if she was sure, noting that forging loan documents was a federal crime. Cassandra had written back that it wasn't forgery if it served the family business, that they needed the capital, and once the assets transferred to them, it wouldn't matter anymore. When Preston worried that Walter would find out eventually, Cassandra had assured him that by then, they'd own everything, and Dad couldn't do anything about it. Her final line stayed with me. "This is how wealthy families work. Dad's done worse." My hands remained steady as I read, but something cold settled in my chest. It wasn't just Preston. Cassandra had been complicit from the beginning, providing signature samples and encouraging the fraud. This was premeditated. "We're forwarding this to the FBI," Martinez said. "Bank fraud is federal jurisdiction." I went directly from the police station to Rebecca's office. She was still working despite the late hour, and I could tell from her expression that she'd been expecting my call. "The police have enough for conspiracy and assault charges," I told her, settling into the chair across from her desk. "But the loan fraud is bigger. FBI territory." Rebecca agreed. "Preston forged the signature, but your sister provided the documents. That's conspiracy to commit bank fraud." She leaned back, studying me. "You've been documenting irregularities in your father's business for months, haven't you? Those questions you asked me back in August about reporting corporate fraud weren't theoretical." I'd underestimated how closely she watched. I noticed discrepancies, import records that didn't match customs declarations, inconsistencies in tax filings. I started keeping notes. "Did you contact authorities?" "I spoke with someone at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit 6 months ago, informally." Rebecca's expression shifted to something like professional admiration. "Fallon Morgan, you've been playing a very long game. I wasn't certain until the attack. Now I am." The next morning, I drove to the federal building for my meeting with Agent Susan Morrison. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor and government-issue furniture that was surprisingly well-maintained. Morrison herself was 45 with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "You contacted us in May regarding suspicious activity in your father's textile import business," she said after I'd sat down. "We've been investigating. Based on your initial report and the documents you provided, we opened a case for import duty evasion, customs declaration, falsification, and tax fraud. Your father's company has been underreporting shipment values from overseas manufacturers for at least 5 years. She showed me files on her computer shipping manifests with altered values, tax returns with fabricated deductions, bank records showing unreported offshore transfers. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. We've been building this case for 6 months, and we were ready to move," Morrison continued. "But there's a complication. The fraud occurred under your father's ownership, but legal liability transferred to your sister on November 19th. So she's liable for crimes she didn't directly commit. Legally, yes, unless we can prove she was complicit, which the emails Blair Montgomery provided help establish. She knew about the loan forgery and facilitated it. That gives us conspiracy charges in addition to the inherited liability." Morrison leaned forward. "What we need from you is testimony documentation and patience. We want to arrest them together, Preston for forgery, your father for fraud and tax evasion, Cassandra for conspiracy. but we need them in one place. Christmas, I said. My family always has Christmas dinner together. My mother hosts. It's a big gathering with extended family. When December 25th evening around 6, Morrison made a note. That's a month away. Can you wait that long? I thought about the parking garage, the bruises that had finally faded the $13.6 million in debt my sister had just discovered she owned, and the careful planning that had led to this moment. I've waited 38 years. I can wait 30 more days. When I left the federal building that afternoon, the sky had turned gray and cold with winter asserting itself over Boston. My phone rang as I walked to my car. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Fallon, it's Uncle Wallace. I stopped walking. He never called unless it mattered. There's something you need to know. He said, his voice heavy with something I couldn't identify. About Cassandra. About why she is the way she is. It's about when you were children. Something your mother did. Something I witnessed and should have said something about decades ago. Wind from Boston Harbor cut through my coat. The city sounds faded traffic voices, the distant horn of a ship, leaving only his words and my heartbeat. I'm listening. Uncle Wallace lived in a restored colonial in Brookline, the same house he'd bought when he was appointed to the bench 40 years ago. I drove there Sunday afternoon past neighborhoods strung with Christmas decorations, wondering what secret could justify decades of silence. The house was white-clappered with black shutters and a brick walkway lined with unraked leaves. Warm light glowed from the windows. Wallace opened the door before I could knock, looking older than I'd ever seen him, his face drawn with something that might have been shame. Thank you for coming. Inside his study was wood-paneled and lined floor to ceiling with legal texts. 2 leather chairs faced a fireplace where a fire crackled softly. Tea had already been prepared on the side table. The room felt formal but warm, the kind of space where difficult truths could be spoken. Wallace poured tea with hands that trembled slightly. I'd never seen him nervous. Uncle Wallace, retired Massachusetts Superior Court judge, didn't get nervous. You said this was about Cassandra, I prompted, and about you and your mother and a lie that's been maintained for 33 years. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me. I should have spoken up then. I didn't. That makes me complicit. Uncle Wallace, what are you talking about? He reached for a leather portfolio on the side table, old and worn at the edges. Do you remember elementary school Miss Porter's Academy? Vaguely. Cassandra and I were in different classes, even though we were only 2 years apart. There was a reason for that. He opened the portfolio carefully, as if handling something fragile. When you were 5, the school administered IQ and aptitude tests, standard assessments for all incoming students. He spread documents across the coffee table between us dated 1992 in faded typewriter ink. Test results: Fallon Morgan, age 5. IQ score 142, extremely gifted range. Reading comprehension, 3rd grade level. Mathematical reasoning, 2nd grade level. Recommendations accelerated program, consider grade advancement. Test results: Cassandra Morgan, age 5, IQ score 108, average range. Reading comprehension, kindergarten level. Mathematical reasoning, below average. Recommendations: supplemental support may require tutoring services. I stared at the papers, my tea cooling in my hands. I don't understand. Why am I only seeing these now? Wallace's voice was heavy. Because these aren't the records your mother showed you, or anyone else. He pulled out a second set of documents, same date, different results. These are modified test results. Fallon Morgan, IQ score 115, above average. Recommendations: standard academic program. Modified test results: Cassandra Morgan, IQ score 118, above average. Recommendations: consider gifted program placement. My hands had started to shake. She switched them. Vivian called me the day she received the real results. She was frantic, crying. She said she couldn't let Cassandra grow up thinking she was inferior to her older sister. Wallace's jaw tightened. I told her she couldn't alter official school records, that it was fraud. She said she wasn't altering them. She just wasn't going to share the real ones. She was going to ask the school to be discreet about praising your achievements in front of Cassandra. He paused, looking into the fire. I watched her seal the real results in an envelope and hand them to me for safekeeping. Then she submitted the modified versions to the school administration. I tried to process this. So my entire childhood, every time I was told not to show off or make my sister feel bad, was based on your mother's decision to suppress your intelligence to protect Cassandra's ego. The room felt too warm suddenly. I set down my tea before I could drop it. Did Cassandra know about the switch? Wallace's expression turned even grimmer. I believe so. When Cassandra was 12, I visited your house. I overheard Vivian on the phone with someone her therapist, I think, talking about a secret regarding the kids' tests. Cassandra was homesick that day. Her bedroom was directly above your mother's study. She overheard. I think so. After that, Cassandra's behavior changed. She became performative, obsessed with appearance, popularity, surface achievements, as if she knew she couldn't compete intellectually, so she'd compete in other ways. I stood up, needing to move. Memories were rearranging themselves with sickening clarity. Cassandra's sudden interest in looks around age 12. Her desperate need to be the pretty one, the popular one, the one everyone admired. Her dismissal of anything academic as boring or nerdy. Her entire identity was built on a lie. Worse, Wallace said quietly, it was built on knowing the lie. She spent her teenage years believing she was inherently less intelligent than you, and your parents had chosen to hide it rather than help her. I felt an unexpected surge of empathy, sharp and unwelcome. No wonder she hates me. It doesn't excuse what she's done, but it explains why. I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Families walking dogs, kids riding bikes, normal Sunday afternoon scenes that felt impossibly distant from this revelation. They created both of us, I said slowly. They suppressed me and inflated her. Neither of us got to have a real childhood. That's why I'm telling you now. Wallace stood, joining me at the window. You deserve to know the truth. And Fallon, Cassandra deserves to hear it from someone who isn't Vivian. You want me to tell her, I think she needs to know that you know, that the playing field was never level, that your excellence wasn't your fault and her averageness wasn't hers either. After she hired people to attack me, maybe especially after that. He touched my shoulder gently. She's been fighting a ghost her whole life. Maybe it's time someone told her the ghost was manufactured. I left as dusk was falling the portfolio with the real test results on my passenger seat. 33 years of psychological manipulation exposed through test scores and altered documents. The streets of Brookline gave way to the city Christmas lights blurring past my windows. My phone rang, Cassandra's number. I almost didn't answer, but Wallace's words haunted me. She needs to know that you know. I pulled over and answered. Fallon. Her voice was hoarse raw, like she'd been crying for hours. I need to talk to you, not about the money, about something else. Something Mom did when we were kids. She knew, or suspected. Where do you want to meet? We met on neutral ground, the Thinking Cup on Tremont Street, far from Beacon Hill, far from our past. Cassandra looked different, thinner. The perfect Instagram polish was gone. For the first time in my memory, she looked vulnerable. She arrived 10 minutes late wearing a designer coat that was wrinkled as if she'd slept in it. No makeup, which was so unusual for her that I almost didn't recognize her at first. She slid into the seat across from me without making eye contact. I didn't hire those guys to actually hurt you, she said immediately, just to scare you. That's not an apology. I'm not apologizing, I'm explaining. Silence stretched between us. The cafe noise, espresso machines, hissing conversations, humming, felt very far away. Uncle Wallace told me, I said finally. About the tests, the school assessments. Cassandra's head snapped up. He showed you. Not a question, a statement. You knew. When did you find out? She laughed bitter and sharp. When I was 12, homesick with the flu. Heard Mom on the phone. She said, I can't let Cassandra know she's not as smart as Fallon. It would destroy her. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Confirmation that everything I'd suspected was true. I became the pretty one because I couldn't be the smart one. That's not, don't. She held up a hand. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because Preston is screwing me over, and despite everything, you're the only person smart enough to help me understand how bad this actually is. I blinked, genuinely surprised. Was Cassandra asking for help? She pushed a folder across the table. Blair gave the police everything, including things I didn't know about. Preston's been running schemes I had no idea existed. I opened the folder. Bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, multiple shell LLCs with names I didn't recognize, real estate transactions that looked like classic Ponzi structures using new investor money to pay returns to old investors while siphoning funds to personal accounts. How much of this did you know about? I asked carefully. She met my eyes directly. The loan forgery I knew. I gave him Dad's signature samples, but this, she gestured at the offshore accounts. This is new to me. You're saying Preston was running separate frauds on top of the one you were involved in. I married a con man. Turns out he was conning me too. The admission hung in the air between us. I studied her face looking for deception, but all I saw was exhausted honesty. Why did you marry him? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was almost too soft to hear over the cafe noise. Honestly, at first it was about you. What? I met Preston through Blair in 2021. He seemed charming, successful. I thought if I introduced you two at Mom's birthday party, you'd be interested. She looked down at her coffee. He was exactly your type. Smart financial background, ambitious. My plan was to let you date him for a while, then steal him away. Proof that I could take anything from you. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. That's insane. But you didn't care. Her laugh was hollow. You talked to him for 5 minutes, then went back to networking with your colleagues. You didn't even remember who he was when I announced we were engaged 6 months later. I had a vague memory of that party, dozens of people I'd been introduced to, most of whose names I'd forgotten by the end of the night. I thought he was just another one of your placeholder boyfriends. That's what made me furious. I'd planned this elaborate revenge and you didn't even notice. So I married him anyway, to prove... She trailed off. I don't even know anymore. You married someone just to spite me, and I didn't even know daily life in my county. The bitterness in her voice was almost funny, except it wasn't funny at all. I sat back processing this. The marriage that had seemed like genuine happiness was actually a weapon aimed at me, a weapon I'd been completely unaware of. It would be funny if it weren't so desperately sad. Preston's schemes, I said, steering us back to safer ground. Do you have documentation? Everything Blair had, which is apparently everything Preston thought he'd deleted. She pulled out a flash drive. It's all here. I gave copies to the police. I'm giving you one because I need to know what it means legally, how much trouble I'm actually in. I took the drive. Have you talked to a lawyer? 3. They all said I'm liable for the business debts, but the criminal charges depend on what I knew and when I knew it. The offshore accounts and the real estate Ponzi, I can prove I didn't know about those. The loan forgery, she swallowed. That one's harder. Because you were complicit. Yes. At least she wasn't denying it anymore. After she left, I sat in the cafe for another 20 minutes, then called Agent Morrison from my car. Your sister claims she didn't know about Preston's offshore schemes, I said without preamble. Do you believe her? I don't know, but she's cooperating with local police on the assault charges, and she's given them documents about the loan forgery. That could be useful. Would she testify against Preston? I think so. She's realizing he used her. Good. The Christmas dinner plan's still happening. My mother sent formal invitations last week, including one to me, surprisingly. Will your sister be there? Family tradition, she'll be there. Then we'll be ready. I drove home through afternoon traffic, my mind working through implications. Cassandra was still accountable for the attack, for the conspiracy. But the childhood revelation complicated everything. We were both victims of our parents' manipulation. We'd just chosen different responses to it. I'd chosen independence. She'd chosen competition. Neither choice excused present actions, but understanding helped. I could understand her and still hold her accountable. Those two things weren't mutually exclusive. The Christmas invitation sat on my kitchen counter for a week before I responded to it. Vivian had written in her perfect cursive, "Despite recent difficulties, you are still our daughter." Please join the family on December 25th. It's time to heal this family. Rebecca thought I was crazy to attend. Agent Morrison thought it was perfect. I thought it was necessary. I texted Vivian, I'll be there 6 p.m. Her response came instantly. Wonderful darling, let's put all this unpleasantness behind us. She didn't know what was waiting for her. None of them did. In 2 weeks, federal agents would walk into her Christmas dinner. Her husband would be arrested for tax fraud and customs violations. Her daughter would be arrested for conspiracy. Her son-in-law would be arrested for bank fraud and forgery. And I would watch it happen, knowing I'd helped orchestrate every step. The game was almost over. I just had to survive Christmas dinner first. Rebecca called me on Wednesday morning, December 11th, while I was reviewing a municipal bond portfolio for a hospital network in Worcester. Her voice was tight. I found something. Can you come to my office in an hour? I closed my laptop, told Sharon I'd be out for the afternoon, and took an Uber to Rebecca's firm on State Street. When I arrived, she had her conference table covered in printed emails, bank statements, and a timeline drawn on a whiteboard in blue marker. Ethan Brooks, a 26-year-old junior analyst Rebecca sometimes hired for forensic work, sat at the far end with his laptop open, pulling up spreadsheet after spreadsheet. Rebecca didn't waste time. Preston's real estate projects, they don't exist, never did. No LLC filings, no property deeds, no construction permits. But the timeline bothered me. So I had Ethan pull every email between Preston and your family going back to 2019. She slid a printed email across the table. The sender was Cassandra Morgan. The recipient was Preston Cole. The date was November 10th, 2019, 3 days after the Morgan Foundation Charity Gala at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. I read it twice. Subject, let's talk. Preston, I saw you watching my sister last night. She'll never notice you. She's too busy with her career. But I will. Let's talk. I have a proposal that benefits both of us. Cassandra. I looked up at Rebecca. She approached him first. Keep reading. The next email was dated November 15th, 2019. Preston's reply. Cassandra. I'm listening. Coffee tomorrow. Thinking cup 10 a.m. P. And then Cassandra's response same day. Perfect. Bring your tax returns. I want to see how desperate you are. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Rebecca pulled up another document on her laptop and turned the screen toward me. This is the metadata from their first meeting. Cassandra recorded it on her phone. The file was stored in her iCloud backup. Ethan recovered it last night. She pressed play. The audio was scratchy, recorded in a noisy cafe. I could hear the hiss of an espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic mugs, the low hum of conversation. Then Cassandra's voice, bright and confident. So here's the deal. You want money. I want revenge on my sister. My father's company is worth $8 million in assets, but it's drowning in debt. He's been hiding for years. If we play this right, we can drain the offshore accounts frame Fallon for the tax evasion and walk away with $6 or $7 million. Preston's voice, cautious. Why would I trust you? Because I know every password, every account number, every skeleton in the Morgan family closet. And because if you say no, I'll make sure my father knows you were sniffing around Fallon. He's very protective. Preston laughed. It was a low, calculating sound. What do you get out of this? Satisfaction, Cassandra said, and half the money. The recording ended. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My hands were shaking. Rebecca's voice was gentle. Fallon, your sister, planned this from the beginning. Preston didn't target you. She targeted him. I closed my eyes. I thought about the past 6 years. Cassandra's sudden engagement in 2020, the quick wedding in 2021, her constant requests for money, her complaints about Preston's business failures, her performance at family dinners, where she played the devoted wife. It had all been an act. Not Preston manipulating her manipulating everyone. Rebecca continued, I confronted Preston's lawyer this morning. He's willing to testify that Cassandra orchestrated the loan fraud set up the offshore accounts under Preston's name. So he'd take the fall if they got caught and controlled every step of the plan. Preston thought he was the mastermind. He was just her tool. Ethan spoke up from the end of the table. There's more. I traced the payments for Paige Donovan's apartment, the Mistress in Millennium Tower. The lease is in Preston's name, but the rent payments come from an account controlled by Cassandra. She's been paying $8,500 a month since 2023. I looked at him. Why would Cassandra pay for her husband's mistress? Control, Rebecca said. As long as Cassandra paid the rent, Preston stayed distracted and dependent. Paige thought Preston was funding her lifestyle. Preston thought he was hiding the affair. Cassandra knew everything. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the financial district glittered in the December sun. People walked past on the sidewalk below, carrying coffee cups and shopping bags, living ordinary lives. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. My voice came out flat. She's been planning this for 6 years. Yes. She married him to destroy me. Yes. I turned around. Does the FBI know? Rebecca nodded. I sent everything to Agent Morrison this morning. They're adding charges. Cassandra's looking at 25 to 30 years now. Preston will get 18 to 20 as a co-conspirator, but the prosecutors know he's the secondary player. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen showed an incoming call from Cassandra. I stared at it for a long moment, then put the call on speaker and set the phone on the conference table. Rebecca and Ethan leaned in. Hello. Cassandra's voice was hoarse, broken, trembling. Fallon, I need to talk. Not about the money, about something Mom did when we were kids, something I just found out. Can we meet? I looked at Rebecca. She shook her head slowly and mouthed the word manipulation. I thought about the recording from 2019. I want revenge on my sister. I thought about the past 6 weeks, the attack in the parking garage, the deep fake audio, the fake heart attack at Christmas dinner, all of it planned, all of it performed. And now this. The crying voice, the vulnerable plea, the perfect bait. I felt a strange calm settle over me. My little sister wasn't a victim. She was a predator, and I was done being her prey. I picked up the phone. My voice was steady. Where do you want to meet? Cassandra arrived at Rebecca's office on Thursday afternoon, December 14th. I watched from the conference room window as she stepped out of an Uber wearing a wrinkled Burberry trench coat and oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile. Rebecca stood beside me, arms folded. Don't forget what you heard on that recording. Cassandra walked into the conference room and stopped when she saw Agent Morrison sitting at the head of the table, her laptop open, her FBI badge clipped to her belt. Morrison gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down, Ms. Morgan. Cassandra's eyes darted to me, then to Rebecca, then back to Morrison. She sat slowly, clutching her purse in her lap. I thought this was just going to be Fallon and me. Morrison's expression didn't change. This is a federal investigation. Nothing about this is just between you and your sister. She opened a folder and slid a photograph across the table. It showed Cassandra and Preston sitting in a cafe, heads close together, a stack of papers between them. The date stamp read November 15th, 2019. We know you recruited Preston Cole. We know you planned the loan fraud, the offshore accounts, and the tax evasion scheme. We recovered the recording you made of your first meeting with him. We have 6 years of emails, financial transfers, and witness testimony. Cassandra's face went white. Her hands trembled. I didn't... Morrison cut her off. We also know you created the deep fake audio file that was sent to my phone on Christmas night. You used Adobe Premiere and a voice synthesis program called Descript. Your subscription is registered under your name. The project files are stored on your MacBook Pro serial number matched to the laptop seized from your apartment yesterday morning. Cassandra looked at me. Tears started streaming down her face. Fallon, I'm so sorry. Preston made me do it. He said if I didn't help him, he'd tell everyone I knew about the fraud. I was scared. Stop. Morrison's voice was sharp. We've been surveilling you since October. We know Preston didn't make you do anything. We have footage of you meeting with Blair Montgomery in September, planning the parking garage attack. We have your search history, how to fake a heart attack, how to create deep fake audio, statute of limitations, financial fraud, Massachusetts. You weren't coerced. You were the architect. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the heating system. Cassandra stared at the table, her jaw clenched. Finally, she looked up at Morrison. The tears were gone. Her voice was flat. "What do you want?" Morrison leaned back in her chair. "Preston Cole is willing to testify that you orchestrated everything. Your father is willing to testify that you forged his signature on multiple documents. Blair Montgomery is willing to testify that you paid her $1,500 to hire the men who attacked your sister. You're looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison for bank fraud, conspiracy, assault, obstruction of justice, and forgery." Cassandra's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Or you testify against Preston and your father. You provide every document, every password, every detail of the offshore accounts. You plead guilty to conspiracy and obstruction. You get 3 to 5 years eligible for parole in 18 months. I watched my sister's face. She was calculating, weighing her options, running the numbers like I would run a financial model. She wasn't broken. She was strategizing. After a long moment, she said, "I want the deal in writing." Morrison slid a document across the table. "Your attorney can review it. You have 24 hours to decide." Cassandra picked up the document, skimmed it, and set it down. She looked at me. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. "Fallon, I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to understand I was drowning. Mom always loved you more. Dad ignored me. I felt invisible. Preston saw that. He used it. I didn't say anything. Rebecca's hand rested on my shoulder, a silent reminder. Cassandra kept talking. "When I get out, I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to be the sister you deserve. I know it'll take time, but..." "Cassandra." My voice was quiet. She stopped. I met her eyes. "Sign the deal, testify, serve your time, but don't ever contact me again." Her face went blank. For just a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, rage maybe, or contempt, and then it was gone, replaced by the mask of hurt and confusion. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "You'll regret this, Fallon. I'm your sister." "No," I said. "You were my sister. Now you're just evidence." She left. The door closed. Morrison gathered her files. "She'll sign. She has no choice." Rebecca sat down beside me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. I wasn't, but I would be. 10 minutes later, Cassandra's phone rang in her purse. She'd left it on the table. The screen lit up with a caller ID, Mom. Morrison picked it up and handed it to me. "Your mother's been calling her every hour since yesterday. Vivian has no idea what Cassandra did. She thinks Preston manipulated her daughter." I stared at the phone. The ringing stopped. A voicemail notification appeared. I set the phone down. "Let her think that." Morrison nodded. "Vivian Morgan won't face charges. Toxic parenting isn't a federal crime, but Cassandra used her mother's love as cover for 6 years. That's not illegal. It's just cruel." The room fell silent again. Outside, the city moved on. Christmas Eve morning broke cold and white over Boston. I woke at 7 to find snow already falling soft and steady, transforming the city into something cleaner than it actually was. I made coffee slowly, French pressed the real ritual, and spread evidence folders across my kitchen island while the sky gradually lightened. Loan documents with Walter's forged signature. IRS tax lien notices totaling $4.9 million. Preston's offshore bank statements showing $8.7 million in fraudulent proceeds. The lease agreement for Paige Donovan's Millennium Tower apartment rent paid from those same offshore accounts. Everything organized, documented, ready. I reviewed it all one final time with the detachment of someone preparing for a presentation, which in a way I was. Tonight I would present the evidence of my family's crimes to them before federal agents walked through the door. Tonight, everything I'd planned for 6 months would finally execute. At 9, I dressed in an understated navy suit, professional, but not flashy, the kind of outfit that wouldn't draw attention, but commanded quiet respect. I stopped at Tata Bakery on my way to Rebecca's office, needing one last moment of normalcy before the machinery I'd set in motion reached its conclusion. The barista who usually made my cappuccino smiled as I approached. "Merry Christmas Eve, Ms. Morgan. Any fun plans for tomorrow?" "Family dinner." I said, which was technically true. That sounds lovely. Enjoy. I took my coffee to the window seat and watched Charles Street fill with last-minute shoppers, everyone carrying bags wrapped in festive paper, their faces bright with anticipation. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt that kind of uncomplicated Christmas joy. Maybe when I was 7 or 8, before I'd started noticing how differently my parents treated Cassandra and me, before I'd learned to make myself smaller to avoid making my sister feel bad, before I'd understood that love in my family came with conditions I could never quite meet. This would be the last Morgan family Christmas. After tonight, there would be no more formal dinners at 127 Mount Vernon Street, no more forced smiles and performative harmony, just consequences finally arriving after decades of delay. At 2 o'clock, I met Rebecca at her office. She had Agent Morrison on speakerphone, the connection clear, despite the distance. "Miss Morgan, everything's in place," Morrison said without preamble. "Surveillance van has been positioned on Mount Vernon Street since 6 this morning. Agents Morrison and Jackson will enter at 7:30 after dessert as planned. We have arrest warrants for Preston Cole and Walter Morgan. Cassandra Morgan will not be arrested tonight per her cooperation agreement." Understood. "One more thing." Rebecca pulled a small device from her desk drawer, a wireless microphone barely larger than a button. "Wear this. Audio only, no video, just in case Preston tries anything." I pinned it inside my suit jacket. "You think he might get violent? I think desperate people do unpredictable things." Rebecca's expression was serious. "Your uncle will be there as a witness, but I want us to have real-time audio if something goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong. Humor me." At 4 o'clock, right on schedule, my phone rang. Vivian. I let it ring 3 times before answering a small act of defiance she'd never know about. "Fallon, darling." Her voice dripped with artificial warmth. "I'm just confirming you'll be here at 6. Your father has been asking about you." I said I'd be there. "Wonderful. You know this has been such a difficult year for the family. Your father's health has been fragile. All this stress." A delicate pause. "He could have a heart attack, you know. At his age, with everything that's happened." The manipulation was so practiced it was almost beautiful. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life, the subtle suggestion that my actions might literally kill my parents, that I owed them my compliance in exchange for my existence. "I'll see you at 6, Mother. And Fallon, please, try to let go of whatever grudges you're holding. Cassandra is finally happy. Preston is good for her. This is what families do. We forgive, we move forward together." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, "I'll see you soon," and ended the call. By 5:30, the snow was falling harder, fat flakes that stuck to car windshields and coated tree branches in white. I drove through the financial district toward Beacon Hill, watching the city transform into a Christmas card version of itself. Charles Street glowed with white lights strung between lampposts. Shop windows displayed scenes of domestic perfection. Families gathered around trees, children opening presents, everyone smiling. I parked 2 blocks from 127 Mount Vernon Street, the way I always did when visiting my parents. Some habits were too ingrained to break even now. The walk gave me time to center myself to remember why I was doing this. The neighborhood was quiet, most residents already inside preparing their own holiday meals. My breath formed clouds in the cold air. Somewhere, a church bell rang 6 times clear notes cutting through the snow-muffled silence. I walked up the brick path I'd walked 1,000 times before, past the gas lanterns flickering on either side of the black front door, past the wreath made of real evergreen and tied with gold ribbon. Through the tall windows, I could see everything the 12-foot Fraser fir decorated in the gold and white color scheme Vivian had used for as long as I could remember. The crystal chandelier reflecting firelight from the hearth, the crowd of guests in formal attire holding champagne flutes. Cassandra was visible near the tree wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She was laughing at something someone had said, but even from outside I could see the brittleness in it, the performance of joy, rather than the real thing. Preston stood behind her with one hand possessively on her shoulder. He looked relaxed, confident, completely unaware that FBI agents were parked a block away with arrest warrants bearing his name. Walter held court near the fireplace, gesturing with his Scotch glass while business associates nodded attentively. Vivian moved through the room like a conductor, ensuring everyone had drinks, directing servers, with nearly imperceptible gestures, the perfect hostess orchestrating the perfect evening. None of them knew what was coming. None of them suspected that in 90 minutes, their carefully constructed world would shatter like the crystal they were drinking from. My hand closed around the brass doorknob cold against my palm. I took one final deep breath of winter air and felt something settle inside me. Not quite peace, but close enough. Resolve, maybe. Or just the calm that comes when you've made your choices and there's no turning back. I thought about the evidence folders on my kitchen counter. The FBI agents waiting in their van, Rebecca monitoring the wireless mic, Cassandra inside brittle and afraid. My parents oblivious to everything they'd set in motion. I turned the knob. "Showtime," I whispered and pushed open the door. "Before I walk through that door and everything explodes, literally, I need you to predict something. Comment a number. How many minutes do you think it takes before the FBI walks in? 10, 20, 30, drop your guess below. Because this Christmas dinner is about to become a crime scene. Quick heads up. What follows contains dramatized elements for storytelling impact. If family confrontations aren't your thing, this is your moment to step away." I stepped inside and silence fell like a curtain dropping. 32 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, some uncomfortable, a few openly hostile. The warmth of the house hit me after the cold outside, along with the scent of pine and expensive perfume, and something roasting in the kitchen. Vivian materialized immediately, her smile frozen in place like a mask. "Darling, you came..." She leaned in for air kisses that didn't quite touch my cheeks, her hands cold and dry against my arms. "We're so glad you could join us." Walter stood near the fireplace with 3 men in expensive suits, his Scotch glass catching firelight. He acknowledged me with the barest nod, his expression carefully neutral, then returned to his conversation as if I were no more significant than a late-arriving caterer. I recognized most of the guests from years of these gatherings, Uncle Wallace near the fireplace, giving me a slight nod of support, Aunt Constance and her husband by the windows, Cousin Spencer with his partner near the bar, Walter's business associates clustered in their usual formation. Vivian's country club friends occupied the prime real estate near the tree, their diamonds catching the chandelier light. Blair Montgomery stood near Cassandra but wouldn't meet my eyes. A server materialized with a tray of champagne flutes. "Ma'am." "No, thank you." The dinner bell chimed at 6:30, an actual silver bell that Vivian rang with practiced grace. We filed into the formal dining room where place cards indicated our assigned seats. I found myself between Cousin Spencer and Aunt Constance, both of whom had always been kind to me in that quiet way that meant they saw more than they admitted. The table was set with Vivian's best china and crystal, the kind that had been in the family for generations. Gold chargers beneath white plates. Fresh flowers, white roses, and evergreen, arranged in low centerpieces so conversation could flow. Candles flickered in silver holders. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Everything was perfect, controlled exactly as Vivian had orchestrated it. The first course arrived lobster bisque in delicate porcelain bowls. Servers moved with silent efficiency. Vivian held court from the head of the table, ensuring conversation flowed, redirecting any topic that might become uncomfortable. Walter carved the prime rib himself, a yearly tradition, his hands steady despite everything. I watched Cassandra across the table. She wore a champagne-colored dress that probably cost thousands and looked stunning. But she barely touched her food, just pushed truffle mashed potatoes around her plate with her fork. She checked her phone twice, setting it face down quickly when Vivian shot her a look. Preston sat beside her, one hand occasionally touching her shoulder or arm, possessive gestures disguised as affection. He leaned close and whispered something. She nodded, her face tight with anxiety. At 7:05, just as dessert was being cleared, Cassandra stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against hardwood. Conversation faltered. Her hand went to her chest. "I can't breathe." "Sweetheart," Vivian half rose from her seat. "My heart." Cassandra's face contorted. She gasped, clutching at her chest with both hands, and then her knees buckled. She collapsed, hitting the floor with a sound that made several guests cry out. Chaos erupted. Vivian screamed. Walter lurched from his chair. Preston dropped to his knees beside Cassandra, his hands going to her neck as if checking for a pulse. "Call 911, he shouted. "Someone call 911. Walter already had his phone out, voice sharp with authority, as he gave the address to the dispatcher. Preston started CPR, theatrical aggressive compressions that looked impressive, but seemed wrong somehow, too performative, too practiced. I moved quickly but calmly, kneeling on Cassandra's other side, pushed Preston's hands away and found her pulse myself, steady and strong beneath my fingers. Her eyelids flickered. She was conscious. I leaned close, my body blocking the view from most of the guests. Cassandra! Her eyes opened slightly. Her lips barely moved. "I'm sorry." She breathed so quietly only I could hear. "He made me." Her gaze flickered deliberately towards something on the floor, her phone fallen from her hand when she collapsed. I palmed it in one smooth motion, sliding it into my jacket pocket as I stood and addressed the room. "She's breathing. Pulse is steady. The ambulance is on its way." Preston looked up at me, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Are you sure she said her heart?" "I'm sure." In the bathroom down the hall, I locked the door and pulled out Cassandra's phone. She'd shared her passcode with me during our meeting at Rebecca's office, a final insurance policy she'd said, just in case Preston tried something. The text thread with Preston was still open, dated December 23rd. Preston had written, "Stage the heart attack at 7. I'll call 911, cancel it later. Buys us 20 minutes to get the cash location from Fallon." Cassandra's response. What if she doesn't tell me? Preston. Then we go to Plan C, the audio deepfake. Blame her for your suicide attempt. Either way, we get control of the narrative. I screenshot the conversation and texted it to Rebecca with a single word evidence. Her response came immediately. "FBI has been listening. They're moving in." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I returned to the dining room where paramedics were rushing through the front door called by Walter before I'd even left the room. They surrounded Cassandra with professional efficiency, checking vitals, asking questions. She sat up slowly, putting on a dazed expression. I think it was just a panic attack. The stress, everything that's happened. "Ma'am, we should take you to the hospital for evaluation," one of the paramedics said. "I'll go with her." Preston was already reaching for his coat. Vivian clutched her chest, her own performance of maternal distress. "I'm coming too. My daughter needs me." I stood, my voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. "Nobody leaves." Everyone froze. "Fallon, don't be ridiculous," Vivian started. The doorbell rang. The sound was deep and resonant, cutting through the murmur of confused voices. All conversation stopped. Preston's face drained of color. Walter turned slowly toward the foyer, his scotch glass forgotten in his hand. I walked calmly to the door and opened it. Agent Susan Morrison and Agent Jackson stood on the threshold, badges held up, their dark suits dusted with melting snowflakes. Behind them, I could see two more agents flanking the doorway and a black SUV parked at the curb with its lights on. Morrison's voice was clear and professional, carrying into the dining room where 32 guests stood frozen. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have arrest warrants for Preston Cole and Walter Morgan." Preston's chair scraped backward before the cuffs came out. He lunged for the French doors, collided with the corner of the mahogany dining table, and knocked a crystal wine glass to the floor. Agent Jackson moved faster, 6'2", former Boston PD tactical unit, and had Preston face down on the Persian rug in 4 seconds flat. The steel cuffs clicked shut. Preston twisted his neck, shouting at Cassandra over the sudden roar of 30 shocked guests. "You did this! You sold me out!" Cassandra stood frozen beside the sideboard, mascara smudged champagne flute trembling in her hand. She said nothing. Agent Morrison held up her badge gold shield, Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Unit, and her voice cut through the noise like a judge's gavel. "Walter Morgan, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. My father, Walter Morgan, textile magnate and Beacon Hill patriarch, took 2 steps toward Morrison and stopped. His face had gone the color of old parchment. He said, "I'm calling Harrison and Caldwell. You'll regret this." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Your attorney has already been notified, Mr. Morgan. You can exercise your right to silence now." My mother, Vivian, let out a sound I'd never heard before, half gasp, half wail, and sank onto the velvet settee near the fireplace. Her perfectly styled silver hair slipped forward over her face. She looked up at Morrison with red-rimmed eyes. "It's Christmas. There must be some mistake." Morrison shook her head. "No mistake, ma'am." Around us, the dinner party disintegrated. Constance Hartwell Walter's oldest business partner pulled her 18-year-old son, Spencer, toward the front door. 3 club friends, men in navy blazers who'd laughed over whiskey an hour ago, made for the exits without eye contact. Blair Montgomery, Cassandra's best friend, and the woman who'd hired the thugs who attacked me in the parking garage slipped out the side hallway. No one said goodbye. I stepped forward. My heels clicked on the marble floor, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. I pulled a manila folder from my handbag Rebecca had printed everything this morning and set it on the dining table next to the half-carved prime rib. "You want to know what they did?" I looked at my mother, then at the remaining guests, then at Uncle Wallace, who stood near the Christmas tree with his arms folded and his face unreadable. Preston Cole forged my father's signature on an $8.7 million commercial loan in March 2022. The loan was supposed to fund a real estate project in the Seaport District. The project never existed. The money went offshore. I opened the folder and pulled out the first page, an email chain between Preston and my father dated April 2022, discussing the best way to backdate a signature and avoid audit flags. I held it up. This is the email where Preston writes, "I'll handle the paperwork. Walter, just send me 3 sample signatures." My father sent them. A forensic document examiner at the FBI matched the signature on the loan application to those samples. It's a forgery, and both men knew it. My father said nothing. Preston, still on the floor with Agent Jackson's knee on his back, turned his head and spat. "You have no idea what you've done, Fallon." I ignored him. I pulled out the second document, the IRS lien notice dated November 30th, 2025. The Internal Revenue Service has filed a claim for $4.9 million in unpaid corporate taxes and import duties. Morgan and Company Textiles failed to pay taxes on shipments from Bangladesh and Vietnam between 2021 and 2024. My father routed the invoices through shell companies to inflate costs and reduce taxable income. When the state transferred the company assets to Cassandra on November 19th, the debt transferred with it. She now owes $4.9 million to the federal government. Cassandra made a choking sound. I met her eyes. She looked terrified. I kept going. The FBI has frozen 2 offshore accounts. Preston Cole holds $6.2 million in a Cayman Islands trust. Walter Morgan holds $1.3 million in a Bahamas limited partnership. Both accounts were funded with money from the fraudulent loan and the unpaid taxes. The total is $7.5 million. The government will seize it as restitution. Uncle Wallace cleared his throat. "What about the house?" I nodded. Bank of America has filed a foreclosure notice on this property, 127 Mount Vernon Street. The auction is scheduled for February 14th, 2025. Estimated sale price $7.3 million. The bank will use the proceeds to cover the outstanding loan balance of $8.9 million, which includes 2 years of penalties and interest. There will be no equity left over. Vivian looked up, her face streaked with tears. "This is your fault, Fallon. You took the trust money. You stole from your own family." I felt a cold clarity settle over me, the same feeling I had the night I initiated the transfer. I took back what was mine, $2.4 million. Every cent came from investments I made between 2012 and 2018 tech, startup equity dividend stocks, crypto gains. The irrevocable trust named me as the sole beneficiary. I had full legal authority to withdraw those funds. You wanted to use me as a scapegoat for Dad's debts. I refused. Wallace stepped forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Vivian, you need to stop." He looked at the guests, who remained maybe a dozen now, mostly people too shocked to move. Fallon is telling the truth. I've seen the documents. Walter and Preston committed fraud. Vivian knew. She signed off on forged signatures. She helped transfer assets to Cassandra to shield them from creditors. And 33 years ago, she tampered with school records to hide Fallon's test scores and inflate Cassandra's. He met my mother's eyes. You lied to both your daughters for decades. Don't blame Fallon for refusing to be your victim. Vivian stood trembling and pointed at me. You're destroying this family. I didn't flinch. You destroyed it when you decided one daughter mattered more than the other. Cassandra moved toward me, hands clasped in front of her chest like a child. Her voice broke. Fallon, please. I didn't know about the loan. Preston told me it was legitimate. I didn't know about the taxes. I swear. I believed her. She'd been manipulated by Preston, by our parents, by a lifetime of being told she was special when she was really just a pawn. I said, Agent Morrison has offered you a deal. 3 to 5 years in federal prison if you testify against Preston and Dad. You'll be eligible for parole in 18 months. If you refuse, you'll face 15 to 20 years as a co-conspirator. Cassandra's face crumpled. I can't go to prison. You can survive it, I said, or you can let them destroy you. Before she could answer, Morrison's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped into the hallway. 30 seconds later, she returned, her expression grim. She held up her phone. I just received an anonymous audio file. It's a threat against Cassandra Morgan. Digitally altered voice, untraceable number. The message says, if she testifies, she won't make it to trial. Morrison looked at me. Ms. Morgan, I need you to stay on site tonight. We're treating this as an active threat. I felt my pulse spike. Cassandra looked like she might faint. Preston, still cuffed on the floor, smiled. Morrison's partner, Agent Jackson, radioed for backup. Outside, through the tall windows, I saw blue and red lights reflecting off the snow. The reckoning had begun, but it wasn't over. The FBI van smelled like stale coffee and wet winter coats. I sat in the back beside Rebecca, watching the taillights of Uncle Wallace's Lexus ahead through the rear window. Snow fell heavy over Beacon Hill, muffling the sirens that had filled the mansion 20 minutes earlier. Morrison drove without speaking, her phone displaying a live GPS feed of the second van carrying Cassandra. Preston and Walter were already at the Federal Detention Center in South Boston, processed and held in separate cells. The city looked ghostly under the streetlights. At 8:45, we turned onto Cambridge Street and pulled into the underground garage beneath One Center Plaza, the FBI's Boston field office. Morrison swiped her badge at the security gate. We parked near the elevator bank, rode to the 4th floor, and entered a conference room where the table was already set up with a laptop, portable speakers, manila folders, and 2 recording devices with blinking red lights. Uncle Wallace arrived minutes later, his overcoat dusted with snow. Cassandra was brought in by Agent Jackson at 9 o'clock. She looked smaller than she had at the mansion. Her silk dress wrinkled her face, streaked with dried mascara. She sat across from me and folded her hands on the table. Morrison activated the recording system. For the record, it is 2100 hours, December 25th, 2025. Present our special agent, Susan Morrison, attorney Rebecca Cross, Fallon, Morgan, Cassandra Morgan, and Wallace Morgan. She glanced at me. Miss Morgan, earlier tonight I received an anonymous audio file. I'm going to play it now. She pressed a button. The speakers crackled. Then my voice filled the room. It was unmistakably mine, the cadence, the inflection, the flat Boston vowels. The recording said, if you don't give me the account numbers, Cassandra, I swear to God, I will make you lose everything. You'll end up in prison or worse. In the background, I could hear office noise keyboards, a phone ringing, the hum of an HVAC system. A timestamp read December 20th, 2025, 14:37. I felt my stomach drop. Cassandra stared at me, her face pale. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She opened her briefcase and pulled out her laptop. Deep fake. We anticipated this. She turned the screen toward Morrison. I recorded our actual meeting on December 20th. Here's the real conversation. She pressed play. This time the voice was still mine, but the words were different. Cassandra, you're going to face consequences, but Rebecca can negotiate a plea deal. You don't have to protect Preston. The tone was supportive, not threatening. There was no office noise, just the quiet acoustics of Rebecca's conference room. Morrison picked up her phone and sent a text. 30 seconds later, a man in a Navy FBI windbreaker walked in, carrying a tablet. Morrison introduced him. This is Thomas, Senior Forensic Audio Analyst. Thomas, run a comparison. Sat down, connected both files to his tablet, and opened a waveform display. He worked in silence for 3 minutes, adjusting sliders, zooming in on spectrograms that looked like neon waterfalls. Finally, he looked up. The anonymous file is fabricated. I'm seeing pitch inconsistencies at 0.3-second intervals splice marks where words were lifted from different sources and compression artifacts consistent with AI voice synthesis. The metadata shows the file was created on December 23rd at 11:42 p.m., not December 20th. He tapped the screen. The file originated from a MacBook Pro serial number W8034TYG9H registered to Cassandra Morgan. I'm also seeing an Adobe Premiere project file titled Fallon_threat_final_V3. PR Proj created on the same device at the same timestamp. Voice synthesis software Descript shows an active subscription since September 2025, registered under the email cassandra.morgan@gmail.com. I looked at Cassandra. She was staring at the table, her jaw clenched. Morrison leaned forward. You created the deepfake yourself, not Preston. You. Cassandra said nothing. Rebecca closed her laptop. There's more. Preston Cole submitted a fake psychiatric evaluation to the U.S. Attorney's Office 3 days ago. It claims Fallon exhibits narcissistic rage and violent tendencies toward her sister. The report is attributed to Dr. Raymond Holt at Boston General Hospital. Morrison pulled a folder and opened it. The document inside had a hospital letterhead, a 2-page typed assessment, and a signature at the bottom, Raymond Holt, MD, Psychiatric Services. Rebecca already had her phone out. She dialed, put the call on speaker, and set it on the table. A man's voice answered after 2 rings. Dr. Holt. Doctor, this is Rebecca Cross, defense attorney. I'm calling to verify a psychiatric evaluation allegedly conducted by you on December 18th for a patient named Cassandra Morgan. There was a pause. I didn't conduct any evaluation on that date. I don't have a patient by that name. Can you confirm your signature appears on this document? Rebecca read the case number. Another pause. That's not my signature. Someone forged it. Rebecca thanked him and ended the call. She looked at Morrison. Boston General has no appointment record for Cassandra Morgan. No billing codes, no insurance claim, no electronic health record. The evaluation is completely fabricated. Morrison turned to Cassandra. You forged the psychiatric report. We traced the hospital letterhead to a PDF template you downloaded from a medical licensing database on December 20th. You practiced Dr. Holt's signature using samples from his published research papers available online. Your browser history shows 17 searches for how to forge medical documents, psychiatric report template Massachusetts, and consequences for forging doctor's signature. Cassandra finally looked up. Her eyes were cold. You can't prove I made that report. Morrison slid a printed screenshot across the table. It showed a Microsoft Word document titled psych_eval_Fallon Morgan _draft 4.docx with file properties listing Cassandra Morgan as the author last modified December 22nd, 2025, 11:14 p.m. We seized your laptop yesterday morning. Our forensics team recovered this from your deleted files. The room was silent. I felt exhausted. Morrison closed the folder. The plea deal we offered on December 14th is off the table. You weren't cooperating. You were performing. Fallon tipped us off about irregular family transactions in May. We've been building a case against you for 7 months. We let you create the deep fake and the fake psychiatric report so we could add federal obstruction charges. Cassandra's face went white. Morrison continued, "You're looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison for bank fraud conspiracy to commit fraud, assault, obstruction of justice, and forgery. Preston Cole will receive 18 to 20 years as your co-conspirator. Your father will receive 15 to 18 years for tax fraud and loan fraud. That's a separate case. Your mother won't face any charges. Toxic parenting isn't a federal crime." I looked at Cassandra. She was shaking her hands, gripping the edge of the table. Morrison stood and gathered her files. Agent Jackson moved toward the door. Morrison paused and looked at me. Her voice was quieter now. "There's one more thing. When we seized Cassandra's laptop, our tech team found a voice memo she recorded on December 1st. It's her talking to herself, practicing what she planned to say if she got caught. You need to hear this." Morrison reached across the table and pressed play. The audio was clear, no background noise, just Cassandra's voice recorded on her phone. She was alone talking to herself, and her voice was nothing like the trembling, vulnerable tone she'd used in Rebecca's office 2 weeks ago. This voice was cold, methodical, almost clinical. "Okay, let me think this through. If the FBI catches me, I'll need a story. I'll say Preston manipulated me. I'll say Mom made me feel inferior my whole life. I'll cry, I'll apologize. Fallon will forgive me, she always does. She's too soft. She thinks being kind makes her strong. It just makes her weak." I felt my chest tighten. Rebecca's hand found mine under the table. Cassandra kept talking. "The truth, I've hated her since we were kids. Not because Mom loved her less. Mom didn't love either of us, not really. Mom loved the idea of having perfect daughters. But Fallon didn't need Mom's approval. She had her own brain, her own career, her own life. She didn't need anyone. I had. What Instagram followers, fake friends, a mother who loved a version of me that didn't exist, I was performing every single day. And Fallon just existed, and everyone respected her for it." My hands were shaking. Uncle Wallace, seated at the far end of the table, closed his eyes. "So in 2019, when I saw Preston trying to talk to Fallon at the charity gala, I saw an opportunity. He was a con artist, I could tell in 30 seconds. Expensive suit, cheap watch, too much confidence for someone nobody knew. I walked up, introduced myself, and said, 'My sister has 20 times the money I do. Want to help me take it?' He said yes in under 5 minutes. Men are so predictable." There was a pause. I heard the sound of Cassandra shifting, maybe sitting down. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter but no less cold. "We got married in 2021. I played the perfect wife Instagram posts, charity events, family dinners. Preston forged the loan in 2022. Idiot put his name on it, not mine. I set up the offshore accounts under his passport. If we got caught, he'd go down first. I'd cry, play the victim, and walk away. The attack in the parking garage. My idea. I wanted to scare Fallon into making a mistake. It didn't work, she's too smart. But it was worth trying. I pressed my other hand flat against the table to stop the trembling. Rebecca leaned closer. The deep fake mine. I've been editing videos for 5 years, Instagram stories, YouTube, TikTok. ANCI voice synthesis is easy if you know where to look. I spent 6 hours building Fallon's voice profile from old family videos. I blamed Preston because the FBI would believe a naive influencer over a finance bro. Worked perfectly. Cassandra laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. Mom doesn't know anything. She's just a narcissist who wanted a perfect daughter to show off at country club lunches. I let her think I was that daughter. I let her think Fallon was the cold, selfish one. And when this is over, when Fallon's reputation is destroyed, and I'm sitting on a beach in the Cayman Islands, Mom will hate Fallon forever. She'll blame Fallon for tearing the family apart. That's almost as good as the money. I closed my eyes. I thought about every family dinner, every birthday, every holiday where my mother had looked at me with disappointment and at Cassandra with pride. It had all been a performance. Not just Cassandra performing for Vivian, Cassandra performing for all of us. Fallon thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'm a victim of Mom's favoritism, of Preston's manipulation of a system that valued looks over intelligence. She'll forgive me because that's who she is, the noble big sister who tries to save everyone. But I don't need her forgiveness. I need her destroyed. I need her to know that I was smarter than she thought, that I beat her. Another pause. When Cassandra spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. And if I go to prison, fine. At least she'll know I did it. At least she'll spend the rest of her life wondering if she could have stopped me. At least she'll never feel safe again. The recording ended. The conference room was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. My hands were still shaking. Rebecca's grip on my hand tightened. Uncle Wallace opened his eyes and looked at me. His face was pale. "That's not the little girl I knew." I whispered, "She never was." Morrison leaned back in her chair. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Cassandra doesn't know we found this. She recorded it on December the 1st as a practice run for her FBI interview. She thought she deleted it. Our tech team recovered it from her iCloud backup when we seized her phone last night. Everything she told us on December 14th, the tears, the apologies, the story about Preston threatening her, it was all scripted. She's not cooperating, she's manipulating." I looked at the table. I felt hollow. Rebecca said, "The deal is off. She's getting the full 25 to 30 years. Morrison stood. "Agent Jackson will transport her back to detention." She paused, then added, "For what it's worth. Ms. Morgan, you tried to see the good in her. That's not a weakness." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I believed her. At 12:30, Rebecca drove me home. The snow had stopped. Boston was silent. I stared out the window at the city lights. Rebecca said, "Do you regret trying to help her?" I thought about it. Finally, I said, "No, but I'll never make that mistake again." My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I opened it. "Ms. Morgan, Agent Morrison. Cassandra has been informed we found the recording. She's requesting to speak with you. She says, 'I want Fallon to hear the truth from me.' Do you want to take the call?" I stared at the screen. Rebecca glanced over. "What is it?" I turned off my phone. "Nothing important." December 26th, 9 o'clock in the morning. I woke up in my apartment to sunlight streaming through the windows. It was the first peaceful sleep I'd had in 6 weeks. I'd turned my phone off before bed and left it on the kitchen counter. The silence felt enormous. I made coffee in my French press, sat at the window overlooking the harbor, and watched the light move across the water. No emails, no missed calls, no emergencies. Just the quiet hum of the radiator and the distant sound of traffic on Storrow Drive. Agent Morrison had called the night before, just after Rebecca dropped me off. I'd answered on the second ring, still sitting in my dark apartment with my coat on. Her voice had been professional, but not unkind. "Cassandra declined to speak with you. She said to tell you Fallon won. I hope it was worth it." I'd thanked Morrison and ended the call. I didn't cry, I didn't feel relief, I just felt tired. The legal outcomes came in waves over the next 3 months. Cassandra was sentenced in March 2025 to 28 years in federal prison for bank fraud conspiracy to commit fraud, assault, obstruction of justice, and forgery. Preston received 18 years as her co-conspirator. Walter was convicted in a separate trial and received 16 years for tax fraud and loan fraud. My mother, Vivian, faced no criminal charges. Toxic parenting wasn't illegal, but the family was destroyed anyway. The sentences were read in a courtroom in downtown Boston on a rainy afternoon in late March. I sat in the back row with Rebecca beside me. I didn't look at Cassandra when the judge read her sentence. I didn't need to. The financial resolution was stark. My $2.4 million trust remained protected, every cent legally mine, untouched by government seizures. The IRS foreclosed on the Beacon Hill mansion in February 2025 and sold it at auction in May 2025 for $7.3 million. The proceeds covered the $4.9 million tax lien, with the remainder applied to the outstanding loan balance. Bank of America wrote off the remaining debt. Morgan and Company Textiles was dissolved. 43 employees were laid off. Uncle Wallace helped negotiate severance packages using what little remained in the company's operating accounts. On January 5, 2025, I returned to work. Lawrence Whitfield stopped by my office that morning and leaned against the door frame. "Take as much time as you need, Fallon." I looked up from my laptop. "I need to work." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I threw myself into the projects I'd left unfinished: a commercial real estate portfolio, a pension fund rebalancing, a leveraged buyout proposal. The work was methodical and demanding. Numbers didn't lie. Spreadsheets didn't manipulate. In March 2025, I was promoted to Senior Vice President. My new salary was $525,000 plus a $600,000 annual bonus. Lawrence shook my hand. "You earned this." I thanked him and kept working. On January 10th, 2025, I met Rebecca for lunch at Tat on Charles Street. Over coffee, I asked her, "Do you regret trying to help her?" Rebecca set down her cup. "I regret that she used our compassion as a weapon, but I don't regret offering it. That says more about us than it does about her." I nodded. I wasn't sure I agreed, but I understood. On January 12th, 2025, I drove to Uncle Wallace's house in Brookline. He made tea and we sat in his study. Before I left, he handed me a photograph. It was old. The colors faded me at 7. Cassandra at 3, both of us holding hands in the backyard of the Beacon Hill house. Our mother had planted tulips that spring. Wallace's voice was quiet. "This girl doesn't exist anymore, does she?" I looked at the photo. Maybe she never did, but I did. I survived. I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet. On January 15th, 2025, a letter arrived from Cassandra. The return address read FCI Danbury Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury, Connecticut. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I opened it. The handwriting was Cassandra's looping, careful, practiced. The letter was 2 pages long. "Fallon, I'm not writing to apologize. I'm writing because I need you to know I don't regret it. I regret getting caught. I regret trusting Preston with details he could testify about. I regret not moving the offshore money faster, but I don't regret trying to destroy you. You want to know why? Because you had everything I wanted and you acted like it was nothing. You had intelligence, money, respect, and you walked around like success was easy. It wasn't easy for me. Nothing was ever easy for me. I had to perform every single day just to get a fraction of what you had naturally. Mom loved an idea of me that didn't exist. Dad ignored me unless I was useful. You pitied me. Preston used me. The only person who ever saw me clearly was me. And I saw a girl who had to fight for every scrap of attention, every dollar, every Instagram like. So yes, I recruited Preston. Yes, I planned the fraud. Yes, I hired those men to scare you. Yes, I created the deep fake. Yes, I forged the psychiatric report. And if I could do it again, I'd do it smarter. I'd cut Preston out entirely. I'd move the money before you even noticed. You won, Fallon. You always do. But don't mistake survival for virtue. You're not better than me. You're just luckier. I want you to live the rest of your life knowing your sister hated you enough to destroy everything, including herself, just to hurt you. Don't write back. I don't want your forgiveness. Cassandra. I read it once. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger or sadness or even disappointment. I just felt clarity. I tore the letter in half and threw it in the trash. That evening, I walked to Boston Common. The snow was melting, leaving patches of brown grass and muddy trails. Spring was coming. I found the bench near the pond where my father used to take me when I was 10. We'd sit there on Saturday afternoons eating ice cream, and he'd talk about the textile business. Once he'd said, "Fallon, you're going to do great things." I sat down now and whispered into the empty air. I did, Dad. I survived her. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and walked across the common toward Beacon Hill. Not toward the mansion. It had been sold, gutted, repainted. I walked past it without looking back. Some families are born, some are built, and some are poison that you have to cut out to survive. I'm Fallon Morgan. I'm 38 years old. I'm Senior Vice President at Sterling Whitmore Capital. I'm a sister to someone who hated me. I'm a daughter to parents who failed me. But most of all, I'm free. My sister wanted me destroyed. Instead, she destroyed herself. That's not justice. That's just consequence. And I'm very good at understanding consequences. And to you listening to this story, remember this family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's knife. I learned that the hard way. For 38 years, I believed blood meant loyalty, that family meant safety. I was wrong. My sister orchestrated family revenge so elaborate it took 6 years to execute. She married a con man to destroy me. She hired thugs to scare me. She forged documents, created deep fakes, and smiled at every family dinner while planning my financial ruin. All because she believed I had what she wanted, and God knows I never saw it coming. Here's what I wish someone had told me. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It wears the mask of love while sharpening the blade. Trust your instincts, document everything, and understand that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones planning your destruction. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're attacked in a parking garage to realize your family sees you as a target, not a daughter. Family revenge, I've learned, destroys everyone the perpetrator most of all. My sister got 28 years in prison. My parents lost everything. And me, I'm free. But I'll never trust family the same way again. God gave us the wisdom to discern good from evil, even in those closest to us. I just wish I'd listened sooner. My advice: protect yourself first. Love doesn't require you to be a victim. And if your family treats you like a safety net while cutting the ropes, walk away. Survival isn't selfish. It's sacred. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced family betrayal? How did you survive it? Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about resilience, justice, and the courage to walk away. And thank you truly for staying with me until the end. Please note some elements of upcoming stories are fictionalized for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your needs.